For decades, Florida was America's playground. Snowbirds, tourists, and booming real estate fueling endless growth. Now, the streets are quiet, condos are abandoned, and the economy is unraveling faster than anyone expected. What went wrong in the Sunshine State? The story is worse than you think. Part 1. The housing market collapse. Florida was once seen as untouchable, the state of endless sunshine, billion-dollar coastlines, and unstoppable waves of tourists. But behind the palm trees and the marketing gloss, something unsettling is unfolding. Homes are sitting vacant. Hotels are losing money fast. More than $64 billion in revenue has disappeared. In just months, thousands of jobs have vanished. Streets that used to be packed with snowbirds now stand silent. Politicians keep boasting about record-breaking numbers, but residents see boarded-up shops and rows of for-sale signs. This isn't a minor slump. It's a collapse. The so-called Empire of Paradise is cracking under its own weight. For the first time in modern history, the Florida dream is fading. The state's housing market, once a national symbol of wealth and sunshine, is now collapsing under its own glitter. Across Florida, more than 180,000 homes remain unsold, the highest number ever recorded. In cities like Tampa and Orlando, entire neighborhoods are lined with for-sale signs, standing like silent gravestones. Prices that once shot past $500,000 are tumbling, and listings that used to sell in weeks now linger for months, often 6 months or longer, if they sell at all. What used to be an easy path to profit has turned into a nightmare of missed mortgage payments and mounting taxes. The insurance industry has become the executioner of this crisis. A few years ago, a typical homeowner might have paid $2,400 a year for insurance. Today, that same policy can exceed $8,000 annually for an average 3-bedroom house. Coastal residents report premiums skyrocketing to $12,000 or even $15,000, draining retirement funds and forcing many to sell or abandon their homes entirely. Some homeowners can't even find coverage anymore. After repeated hurricane seasons that caused billions in damage, insurers are walking away. Owning a home now means holding an asset nobody wants, and nobody can afford to protect. Condo owners are facing a similar crisis. After the Surfside collapse, Florida introduced stricter building safety rules that required older buildings to undergo costly recertifications. That triggered a financial shock. Monthly condo fees that used to average $400 have jumped to over $1,200 in 2025. Elderly residents who spent decades paying off their units now find themselves crushed by maintenance costs higher than rent in New York City. In Broward County alone, more than 22% of condos are now listed for sale, and buyers are demanding deep discounts. Developers who once bragged about unstoppable demand are now slashing prices and offering desperate incentives. Free pools, upgraded appliances, even cars, to attract buyers. But it's not working. Florida's population growth has stalled, and those who can afford to leave are moving to cheaper, safer states. Across the state, half-built subdivisions stretch like ghost towns, symbols of unfinished dreams and financial wreckage. The state that once embodied the American real estate fantasy has become its cruelest irony. In Florida today, paradise isn't being sold, it's being abandoned. Part 2. The tourism engine collapse. The housing market in freefall is tragic, but when Florida's tourism machine begins to falter, the consequences become catastrophic. The state that once welcomed 134 million visitors annually now struggles to survive as the foundation of its economy erodes. Hotels that once operated at 90% occupancy during peak season are now hovering around 62%, forcing layoffs and leaving lobbies empty, echoing like hollow cathedrals of capitalism. The official reports of record tourism numbers mask the truth. Fewer real tourists are coming, while data is inflated to protect political narratives rather than reflect the struggles of workers. This decline isn't accidental. It's a symptom of deeper economic rot. Every visitor lost represents more than a canceled vacation. It's a missing lifeline for countless small businesses. Restaurant revenues have dropped 28% since early 2025. Operators of attractions in Orlando and Miami report their lowest profit margins since the pandemic. And some have closed after 40 years in business. Even airports, historically reliable indicators of tourism health, are showing declines. International arrivals are down 14%, and Canadian visitors have dropped by nearly 100,000 in a single year. Each percentage point loss translates into thousands of empty hotel rooms, idle taxis, and paychecks that never arrive. Beyond the numbers lies a quiet but devastating reality. Florida's global reputation is fading. Political instability, harsh immigration policies, and reckless rhetoric have turned America's once inviting welcome mat into a cautionary tale. Tourists are choosing alternatives like Mexico, Portugal, and the Caribbean, destinations offering sun without suspicion, safety without political tension, warmth without warning signs. Suspicion, safety without political tension, warmth without warning signs. The tourism decline isn't limited to theme parks or beaches. It seeps into the broader economy. Retail, transportation, and real estate all rely on tourism's pulse. When that pulse weakens, everything slows. Consumer spending across major metro areas has already fallen 9.4%, the steepest drop in the Southeast. Businesses tied to tourism, from cleaning services to grocery suppliers, are caught in the undertow. The link to the housing crisis is clear. Empty hotels mean fewer workers, fewer renters, and reduced demand for housing. Florida's two major economic pillars, real estate and tourism, are crumbling in tandem. One bleeds concrete, the other bleeds cash, both revealing the same truth. The empire of endless growth was never sustainable. It was built on borrowed money, fragile optimism, and the assumption that paradise could never fail. And now, it's failing spectacularly. The cracks widened when loyal seasonal visitors, the snowbirds, stopped coming. For decades, Canadian retirees poured billions into Florida each winter, renting condos, dining nightly, and fueling small-town economies that depended on their rhythm. In 2025, that rhythm broke. Canadian arrivals fell 13%, the steepest decline since 2009. Nearly 3.3 million Canadians used to migrate south each year. Now almost half are choosing other destinations. That single shift wiped out nearly $9 billion in seasonal spending along Florida's coasts. This isn't merely about tourism, it's about economic oxygen being withdrawn. Snowbirds weren't casual visitors, they were part-time residents keeping Florida's off-season alive. Their absence means shuttered restaurants, silent marinas, and rental properties turning into liabilities. Cities like Fort Lauderdale, Naples, and Clearwater built their tax base around this seasonal economy. With the migration disrupted, sales tax revenue in these regions has already dropped 7% year over year, straining local budgets to the limit. Why did they leave? The answer lies in geopolitical toxicity. Years of inflammatory rhetoric, trade tensions, and policy chaos turned the U.S. into an uncomfortable destination. Travel advisories now caution citizens about visiting America, citing immigration detentions, unpredictable law enforcement, and growing hostility toward foreigners. For retirees seeking peace and affordability, that warning alone is enough to look elsewhere. Alternatives like Portugal, the Canary Islands, and Mexico offer the same sun without the anxiety. Florida's leadership underestimated the fragility of its reputation. Tourism is a trust-based economy, and once trust is broken, no discount flights or marketing campaign can restore it. The state treated international visitors as a guaranteed revenue source, but now that pipeline is collapsing. Hotels formerly catering exclusively to snowbirds are converting into long-term rentals or closing outright. Entire coastal economies are scrambling to adapt, unsure who they are serving. The withdrawal of foreign money has exposed Florida's over-leveraged core. Property markets once inflated by international cash are deflating. Tourism-dependent counties are seeing unemployment rise, and local banks tied to seasonal businesses are tightening credit. The dominoes set in motion by this exodus have driven Florida into a broader economic freefall, not just tourism, but confidence itself. Part 3. Structural collapse and human impact. Florida's crisis has reached the point where collapse is no longer theoretical. It is structural. Every economic pillar that once supported the state is now under simultaneous strain. Growth has turned into contraction, confidence into fear. The illusion of stability is gone, replaced by the quiet understanding that the damage runs deeper than anyone dares to admit. This is the perfect storm economists warned about. Soaring insurance premiums, a housing market in freefall, foreign capital retreating, tourism declining, and a government still pretending everything is fine. Florida's GDP growth, which stood at 3.4 to 4% in 2023, slipped below 1% by mid-2025, marking the sharpest deceleration of any major U.S. state. The problem is compounded by interconnected sectors. When tourism slows, restaurants close. When businesses fail, property values fall. Falling property values shrink tax revenue, forcing cuts to schools, hospitals, and local programs. Florida's counties have collectively lost more than $6.7 billion in projected tax income since 2024, with coastal cities hardest hit. Infrastructure projects are stalled, hurricane preparedness budgets slashed, and public sector employment is shrinking for the first time since the Great Recession. The so-called boom state is running out of cash and credibility. Investors once confident in Florida now treat it as a warning. Bank of America's internal risk assessment labeled South Florida's mortgage exposure as unstable, predicting that by late 2026, nearly 15% of loans in high-risk flood zones could default. The insurance sector is even more fragile. 6 major insurers have withdrawn from the market since 2023, forcing homeowners into state-backed programs nearing insolvency. Citizens Property Insurance, the state insurer of last resort, has seen claims rise 240% in 18 months, a pace regulators warn is unsustainable beyond 2026. Once risk becomes uninsurable, property loses value, and the housing market transforms from asset to liability. The spiral is visible across the broader financial system. Regional banks holding commercial mortgages in coastal zones report delinquency rates above 8.5%, double the national average. Retail centers in Orlando, Naples, and Fort Lauderdale operate at just 70% occupancy, a level unseen since 2009. Multi-million-dollar development projects are paused mid-foundation as capital dries up. Investor sentiment is frozen. Money refuses to move because outcomes are uncertain. Florida's economy has entered a state of financial permafrost. The deeper tragedy is that this was avoidable. Florida's collapse was not caused by one catastrophic event, but by a series of choices prioritizing short-term image over long-term stability. Policymakers underfunded resilience projects while expanding tax breaks for luxury real estate. Climate risks were minimized, insurance analyst warnings dismissed, and the economy glorified as entirely reliant on speculation and tourism. When international tensions erupted and tourism dollars disappeared, nothing remained beneath the surface. Florida's 22 million residents are deeply vulnerable. Nearly 1 in 3 jobs is tied directly or indirectly to travel and hospitality. Remove that pillar, and the state trembles. The result is a population caught between denial and decay. Business associations plead for federal aid, while officials insist all is under control. But the numbers tell the truth. Average household savings have dropped 22% in a single year. Credit card delinquency has climbed to 7.4%, the highest since 2011, and 31% of Miami-Dade households now spend more than half their income on housing, up from 24% just 2 years prior. Beyond numbers, there is profound psychological strain. Residents are no longer dreaming of prosperity. They are simply trying to survive. The collapse feeds itself through perception. Negative headlines drive investors away, lower investment fuels layoffs, and social media amplifies despair. Drone footage of empty beaches, deserted malls, and half-built high-rises spreads with captions like "Florida's Ghost Coast." Perception becomes reality, and once that spiral starts, no public relations campaign can reverse it. Even the theme park industry, once Florida's crown jewel, has adapted to decline. Attendance at major attractions fell 9.3% year-to-date, triggering cost-cutting, reduced hours, and hiring freezes. The world's most visited tourist destination is quietly losing its ability to attract visitors, and the silence is deafening. Migration trends confirm a deeper transformation. For the first time in decades, more Americans are leaving Florida than moving in. Net domestic migration turned negative in early 2025, with 47,000 residents departing between January and July. High costs, rising crime, and collapsing insurance drive this exodus. At its core, faith in Florida's promise has evaporated. What was once marketed as land of opportunity is now whispered about as a California-like paradise. Expensive, environmentally at risk, and economically unstable. Political response remains denial and distraction. Officials celebrate token job gains concentrated in low-wage, high-turnover sectors while ignoring structural issues. Only 27% of Floridians believe the local economy will improve within a year. The lowest optimism rating in any U.S. state. Confidence itself has become a casualty of overconfidence. The emotional texture of Florida's collapse is haunting. GDP loss can be measured. But the quiet emptiness of hotel lobbies, vacant retail corridors, and shuttered condos cannot. Trust between citizens and government erodes. The rhythm of decline, slow, inevitable, and pervasive, now beats through every corner of the state, from Orlando's empty shopping centers to Biscayne Bay's silent waterfronts. Globally, Florida's fall is a cautionary tale. Once a symbol of American optimism and opportunity, it now shows how political recklessness, environmental neglect, and dependency on fragile sectors can erode even the most resilient image. Economists warn that if the downturn accelerates, it could shave 0.3 percentage points off U.S. GDP in 2026. Florida's crisis has become contagious. Finally, there is the collapse of identity. Florida sold the idea that sunshine equaled prosperity. Now, that same climate delivers storms that bankrupt insurers and heat waves that drive up energy bills by 26% year over year. Environment, economy, and politics converge into a single, unavoidable crisis. This story is bigger than one state. It previews America's potential reckoning, a place that grew too fast, ignored too much, and believed its own marketing until reality became undeniable. Part 4. Political fallout, investment retreat, and economic spiral. Every economic collapse begins with a failure of leadership, and Florida's crisis is no exception. This collapse wasn't triggered by a hurricane or a sudden market crash. It was engineered through arrogance, nationalism, and weaponized politics. Rhetoric that once promised freedom and prosperity has now infected the state's financial system, turning it toxic. Foreign investors who once saw Florida as a safe haven are quietly pulling out. Global funds managing over $400 billion now classify the state as high risk, not because of natural disasters, but because of political instability. Tourism, in effect, is diplomacy disguised as leisure, and Florida's leaders ignored that fact. By dismissing international partners and ridiculing foreign visitors, they dismantled decades of economic trust. The fallout is measurable. International investment in Florida's hospitality sector has fallen 22% from 2024, and cross-border property transactions have collapsed nearly 40%. This isn't a coincidence, it's a consequence. No investor wants to risk capital in a region that treats global partners as liabilities. Domestic confidence has also been crushed. Developers, insurers, and business owners are trapped between conflicting signals, calls for economic freedom on one hand and expanding bureaucracy on the other. The result? Stalled projects, frozen construction, tightened credit, and hiring freezes. Economic chaos masquerading as ideology. Each misstep amplifies the last. Housing markets rely on perceived stability, tourism on perceived safety. Both now depend on political narratives gone rogue. Florida's officials continue to celebrate record numbers, while satellite data and ground-level observations show declining energy use, shrinking business activity, and empty public spaces. It's theater. A government reciting prosperity as cities quietly decay. The emotional cost exceeds the financial one. Ordinary Floridians are caught between propaganda and reality. Rents rise, customers vanish, and communities shrink, while policies are created for applause rather than survival. Beneath every speech, press conference, and patriotic display, the state's economic arteries are constricting. Florida's downfall is a cautionary tale, illustrating how political vanity can destroy an economy faster than any natural disaster. Leadership shifted from governance to spectacle, and the price is now measured in empty homes, bankrupt businesses, and a vanishing middle class. The cracks are no longer invisible. The facade of record growth has collapsed into spreadsheets of denial. Retail spending has dropped 11% statewide, business tax receipts fall month after month, and airport passenger counts have dipped below pre-pandemic averages for the first time since 2020. Every indicator points downward. Corporate retreat is visible everywhere. Hotel chains delay expansion, airlines cut routes, and convention organizers cancel bookings due to low attendance forecasts. Internal hospitality reports reveal net profitability plunging from 41% to 29% in just 12 months. This isn't a slowdown. It's a collapse disguised by press releases and selective statistics. The illusion of prosperity survives through manipulated metrics. Florida counts every truck driver and business traveler as a visitor, while genuine tourism contracts. Economic growth reports include disaster repairs and emergency insurance payouts as positive contributions, masking the reality. Florida's true economy, tourism, housing, and consumer confidence is in freefall. The human cost is severe. Parking lots once full of rental cars sit half empty. Storefronts along the coast display the haunting sign, "Available." The catastrophe is quiet, not dramatic, measured in unpaid bills, vanished customers, and drained optimism. Political mismanagement poisoned confidence, international distrust drained capital, and the housing implosion removed the last safety net. What remains is a mirage of prosperity projected through slogans while Florida quietly bleeds. This isn't a recession, it's the anatomy of denial. A slow-motion economic collapse ignored by those in power. It manifests in people, not spreadsheets. Florida's crisis has become a humanitarian issue hidden behind palm trees and press conferences. Tens of thousands of workers across tourism, housing, and retail now face a financial vacuum that statistics alone cannot convey. In the first half of 2025, thousands of hospitality jobs vanished, and part-time coastal employment fell 18%. Behind each statistic lies unpaid rent, defaulted loans, and families cutting groceries to survive. The collapse now includes middle-income earners, teachers, nurses, property managers, and small entrepreneurs. Wage growth has stagnated at 1.4%, while inflation remains above 4.8%, erasing real purchasing power. Cities once affordable, like Sarasota or Fort Myers, now mirror Los Angeles-level costs without comparable income. Local governments, desperate to compensate for shrinking tax bases, have raised property levies and service fees, compounding hardships for already fragile households. Consumer confidence has plummeted to a two-decade low. Foreclosures are up 62% year-over-year, and small business bankruptcies have doubled since last summer. Neighborhoods once sustained by tourism revenue are hollowing out. An invisible migration is occurring, not for opportunity, but for survival. The rhythm of decline is unmistakable. Political toxicity dismantled investor trust, drained tourism, and triggered the housing collapse. Residents, workers, retirees, small business owners bear the full weight of decisions they never made. They face not a temporary slump, but a structural breakdown. Florida's economic model, built on constant growth, perpetual visitors, and borrowed stability, cannot survive if any pillar collapses. Remove all three, and what remains is the human face of collapse. Florida's golden age has ended. The empire of sunshine is fading, not in a single explosion, but through relentless, quiet decline. Collapse rarely announces itself. It comes one delayed payment, one canceled booking, one withdrawn investor at a time, until paradise becomes a monument to what happens when confidence dies before the economy does. Florida isn't collapsing due to bad luck. It is collapsing because of arrogance, denial, and the simple truth. No empire, no matter how warm, wealthy, or golden, can survive once it believes its own illusion.